Hi, Year 12. Really looking forward to seeing you all next week in person. But in the meantime, here is this week's video from me. So we're focusing on private eyes and private investigators this week. So they're also known as PIs, bit different to private detectives who probably have worked for the police force previously. These are slightly different, but there isn't that much of a difference between the two. So you could say if it's a private detective in a crime fiction novel, then they're probably going to have some similar traits, but focused on private eyes and private investigators. So the aims of this session are to have a clearer understanding of the subgenre of private eyes, to analyse two extracts in relation to the elements of crime, and to select evidence which supports the typicalities of the private eye from those extracts. So you've seen this before, the full list from AQA of elements of crime that can be found in fiction. What I'd like you to do is just pause this video, and I want you to read both extracts before we go any further, and have a look, keep this tick list on screen, and your first task will be to annotate both of these extracts with any elements of crime from that tick list. Okay, so pause the video here, complete the reading and annotate. Okay, so once you've done that, could you please take a photograph of these extracts at the end of the session and send them to me, please? So, a famous quote, well, maybe not a famous quote, but a quote from Chandler, who wrote the famous novel The Big Sleep. "I see Marlo always in a lonely street, in lonely rooms, puzzled but never quite defeated." And I chose this quotation to put on this slide because it's very reminiscent of a private detective or a private investigator or private eye. This kind of typifies this character. Okay, so we may have touched on hardball fiction a little bit. The Big Sleep, which you've just read, is an example of hardball fiction, which was originated in America, and with Dashiell Hammett wrote the first novel, which was coined hardball fiction. And it's got a tone to it, like that private detective or private investigator in America walking through the city with a suit or a trench coat on and maybe a trilby hat, and talking to the audience or the listener or the reader. It's got graphic sex scenes in it, it's got graphic violence, very urban settings, and quite fast-paced, slangy dialogue. And when you read Marlo, you've probably got this from the extract already. He's very sarcastic and very cutting about everything that he sees, and that's typical of hardball fiction. So Marlo, Chandler's character, has had a huge influence on detective fiction. I think all of Raymond Chandler's books have been turned into films, so it'd be quite easy to have a look at a clip of that. Or even watch the whole film if it's something that you enjoy. But all of his earlier short stories featured other versions of Marlo, who were basically Marlo, but with different names. He might seem like your typical tough private detective, but as with a lot of private detectives and private investigators, they've got this kind of moral centre. They've got a side to them that knows right from wrong and wants to see justice done. Okay, so let's just go through some of the typicalities of PIs. So the story is often a mystery which is solved by someone who's paid. They don't work for the police, they don't work for a government agency, and they're often represented as these heroes, these white knights who can solve the crime and bring back justice when the system can't. Excuse me. So whatever reason that the police can't solve it or the legal system can't punish the guilty, the PI is hired to put that right and to bring about the restoration of social order. They're usually a fantasy character, and they originate from this idea of Western gunslingers as cowboy hero. And they, as always with fiction, there is an element of fantasy. They don't always reflect what an actual private investigator does. But there is this idea of them filling this gap, this need for a hero. Often told first-person narrative, as it is with Marlo and Cormoran Strike, and you get the story is carried by the PI on every page, and to some extent you could argue that the PI is the story itself. He or she is the story. So, as I've mentioned, they've usually got a strong moral centre. Historically, they have been men because many states in America required a police or military background in order to get a license to become a PI. But of course, now since time has moved on and the genre has moved on, we do see more female PIs. Almost always loners. They have issues with their families. They usually work out of a one-person office, but they've usually got some kind of sidekick. In Cormoran Strike's situation, he does have a secretary. They're often outsiders, very sarcastic, quite free to move between social classes, to mock bureaucracy, and they are often quite amusing and humorous people, as their take on the world is quite amusing. They often blur legal lines, so they do commit crime themselves sometimes, but in order to achieve that ultimate restoration of social order. The sidekick, so the secretary or whoever's in their office, might do all the boring research jobs. And often, because PIs some of them have worked in the police department before, they've often got contacts within the police department who can help them with their investigation. Settings, most are in cities, because that gives the potential for crime and the clients. You often see them walking down these dark alleyways, and that gives lends itself to the film noir, which is used to film a lot of Chandler's the adaptations of Chandler's books. The plot. So often the PI is hired, he stirs things up a bit, or she stirs things up a bit, and then they pick up the pieces after the guilty party reacts in a way that has proven their guilt. But editors these days want something different. They've seen too many PIs interviewing a client. They've seen too many PIs strong-arming the suspects or having a gunfight after the guilty person pulls a weapon. And that does happen with Chandler, with Philip Marlowe. And we still see quite a lot of these things, but editors today want a move away from this and a slight change on the PI novel. There's a lot of interview and research in PI stories, and I like this bit here. The reader sits on the PI's shoulder. We see everything that the PI sees, so we are almost solving the crime at the same time as him or her. There's usually someone who's out to get them, so the PI is often thwarted by people who will not give them information, because no one is obligated to talk to a PI because they're not the police. So, Cormoran Strike. You read an extract from Silkworm, which is the first of 4 novels by Robert Galbraith, who is J.K. Rowling. Basically, she uses the pseudonym Robert Galbraith. And basically, Strike's background is that he lost his leg during the war, and he was a former investigator. Can't remember what SIB stands for. I apologise. He's also got a strange family relationship where he's the love child of a very famous rock star, and that follows him around wherever he goes, and he's very resentful of that. And he's got this sidekick, this secretary called Robin Ellicott, who is brilliant, a brilliant female character who works her way up to be his sidekick, and she challenges him as wherever possible. So your second task is thinking about what the slides that I've just talked through. I want you to use your knowledge from those slides and just have a look at the 2 extracts again. And in a different colour, I would like you to annotate any aspects of the PI, the subgenre of the PI. Where is it evident in these extracts? And I've given you a couple of examples here. You're probably going to find more in the Silkworm extract, because in the Big Sleep, a lot of focus becomes Marlo, excuse me, actually seeing, describing what's in front of him and looking at a couple of the other characters and the setting in quite a lot of detail, rather than the focus being on the detective himself. So do what you can, find what you can. Where are there elements of the PI subgenre in both of these extracts? So annotate that in a different colour. Then your final task is, I want you to think about any books, TV programs or films you might have read or watched where there is a character of a private eye. If you haven't watched or read any of those, do a bit of research. Find something, maybe a TV program that you could watch, or an extract from a book that you could read, and make some basic notes on how that character fits into a subgenre based on what you've learned today. When I asked my dad the other day for a famous private eye, his response was Magnum PI. So you may not ever have heard of that character, but Google it and you'll see. But there's so much crime programs on TV, that you're bound to find something that you can look at. So 3 tasks. The first 2 tasks entail you sending me your annotated copies of the 2 extracts. That's all I want from you this week. I'm not asking you to do an essay. And then just do a little bit of research on your own into fictional PIs. And that's it for today. I will see you all next Tuesday. Please bring your anthologies, pen, paper, and your wonderful selves. Thanks very much. Bye.